Officer Michael Rivera stumbled out of his police cruiser at 2 a.m., exhaustion weighing on his shoulders after responding to a 5-car pileup that had consumed the final hours of his double shift. The dashboard plug's glow illuminated his face as he glanced at the date. His daughter's birthday was tomorrow, and he still hadn't wrapped her present. As he trudged up his driveway in Bayshore Gardens, the motion sensor lights flickered on, revealing a cream-colored envelope taped to his front door, the gold-embossed HOA logo gleaming under the artificial light. Inside, Rivera poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and tore open the envelope. The letter inside was cold and formal. Your continued parking of Clearwater Police Department Vehicle Number 347 on residential property constitutes a violation of Covenant 7.3. His eyes widened at the final paragraph: 7 days to comply or face daily $100 fines and legal action. The signature at the bottom belonged to Eleanor Winters, the newly elected HOA president who'd moved from New York 6 months ago and had already issued more violations than the previous board had in 2 years. Rivera crumpled the letter and hurled it across the kitchen. The cruiser wasn't just a car. It was department policy to keep it at home for rapid emergency response. Just last month, he'd managed to reach the Thompsons' house 4 minutes before the ambulance when their son had a severe allergic reaction. 4 minutes that the doctor later said had made all the difference. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found Captain Reeves. His thumb hovered over the call button before he checked the time and set the phone down. This conversation could wait until morning, but the solution couldn't wait 7 days. "She's got some nerves," said Martha Jenkins, adjusting her bifocals as she examined Rivera's HOA letter at her kitchen table. "After you saved Robert's life last year." Her husband nodded silently, the scar from his emergency bypass surgery just visible above his collar. Martha's fingers trembled slightly as she poured coffee into Rivera's mug. "I'm starting a petition right now." By sunset, the battle lines in Bayshore Gardens had been drawn with surgical precision. Martha's petition had garnered 78 signatures, mostly families with children and elderly residents who valued quick emergency response times. Eleanor Winters countered by sending a community-wide email reiterating the importance of neighborhood standards, attaching photos of various infractions including Rivera's cruiser, a boat in the Hendersons' driveway, and the Patels basketball hoop. The conflict spilled onto Nextdoor and Facebook, where comments escalated from reasonable debate to personal attacks. "Maybe if Winters spent less time photographing our houses and more time volunteering at the community center, we'd all be better off," wrote one resident. Another replied, "Rules exist for a reason. My home value shouldn't decrease because Officer Rivera thinks he's above the covenant we all signed." At Clearwater Elementary, parents awkwardly avoided eye contact during pickup, unsure which side their fellow parents had chosen. The neighborhood book club indefinitely postponed their monthly meeting after a heated text exchange about the dispute. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday evening at the community center. By 6:15 p.m., 15 minutes before it was set to begin, the parking lot was full, and residents lined the sidewalk waiting to get in. Inside, someone had placed a piece of blue tape down the center of the room, an unspoken invitation for residents to physically declare their allegiance. This is Kelly Chen, purporting live from Bayshore Gardens in Clearwater, where a police officer's right to park his cruiser at home has ignited a firestorm of controversy. The attractive reporter stood at the neighborhood entrance, her cameraman panning to capture the "Support Officer Rivera" signs that had sprouted overnight like mushrooms after rain. Sources tell Bay News 9 that Officer Michael Rivera has responded to 17 emergency calls within his own neighborhood over the past 2 years, potentially saving at least 3 lives. The segment cut to Sergeant Tamika Washington standing in front of the police department, her pressed uniform and composed demeanor contrasting with the fury in her eyes. "We ask our officers to be on call, to respond immediately when seconds count. Now we're telling Officer Rivera that helping his neighbors might cost him his home. That's not just wrong, it's dangerous." By noon, #cruiser controversy was trending locally on Twitter. By dinner, Governor Mitchell had weighed in with a tweet supporting first responders. though carefully avoiding specific mention of HOA rights. The Tampa Bay Times ran an editorial questioning whether private housing regulations should be allowed to interfere with public safety measures. At the police station, Rivera found himself suddenly popular among colleagues who had barely acknowledged him before. Officers from other precincts stopped by with coffee and advice. His captain called him into her office, closing the door before speaking. "The chief just got off the phone with the mayor," she said, leaning forward. "This isn't just about you anymore, Rivera. The department has your back, but they're also watching how you handle this. No inflammatory statements to the press, understood? The city attorney will be in touch tomorrow." As Rivera left the station that evening, he noticed Eleanor Winters being interviewed by a different news crew across the street. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away, surprised to see not the triumph he expected, but something that looked almost like uncertainty on her face. The Pinellas County Courthouse steps were crowded with photographers when Rivera arrived for the preliminary hearing. He adjusted his tie, not his police uniform today, but a charcoal suit his sister had insisted he buy for important occasions. This certainly qualified. Inside courtroom 3B, the air conditioning hummed aggressively as Judge Carolyn Hernandez reviewed the filings. Eleanor Winters sat ramrod straight at the plaintiff's table, her gray pantsuit and pearl earrings projecting authority. Her attorney, a man with silver hair and a golden tan, arranged documents with mathematical precision. "Your Honor," the HOA's attorney began, his voice resonating with practiced gravitas. "This case is quite simply about the rule of law. Every homeowner in Bayshore Gardens, including Officer Rivera, signed a legally binding agreement. He presented a slideshow of HOA violations being enforced across the community, attempting to demonstrate impartiality. If we allow exceptions based on occupation, where do we draw the line? The nurse who wants an RV? The construction worker with a cement truck?" Rivera's attorney, Patricia Dominguez, approached the bench with a different stack of documents. "Your Honor, this isn't about special treatment. It's about public interest superseding private contractual obligations." She distributed copies of the police department policy requiring officers to take home their vehicles, then played a 911 call from last December when Rivera had reached a choking toddler 4 doors down from his home in under 2 minutes. The child's mother testified next, describing how Rivera had performed the Heimlich maneuver on her 3-year-old son while they waited for an ambulance during a holiday traffic jam. Her voice broke as she concluded, "My son would not be alive if Officer Rivera's cruiser had been parked at some remote lot." During cross-examination, the HOA's attorney asked Winters about property values. She began confidently, but faltered when asked to produce actual evidence that a police vehicle lowered neighborhood valuation. "Studies show," she began, before admitting she had no specific data for Bayshore Gardens. As the hearing progressed, the judge's expression grew increasingly troubled. When both sides had presented their arguments, she removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "This is not a simple covenant dispute," she said finally. "There are competing interests here that deserve careful consideration. I'm ordering a 30-day mediation period. If you cannot reach a resolution by then, I'll have no choice but to make a ruling that will likely leave neither party satisfied." The Bayshore Gardens Community Center, site of so much division just weeks earlier, had been transformed. Blueprints and material samples covered the tables where angry residents had once faced off. Officer Rivera stood before a 3D model of his property, pointing out modifications as Eleanor Winters nodded, occasionally suggesting adjustments. "If we curve the carport entrance this way," Rivera demonstrated with his hand, "the cruiser will be accessible for emergency response, but barely visible from the street." Winters made a note on her tablet, "And the landscaping buffer here would soften the outline." The HOA could contribute the cypress trees as a gesture of good faith. The compromise had not come easily. The first mediation session had devolved into a shouting match that the professional mediator struggled to control. The second had ended in stony silence. But a breakthrough came during the third session, when Rivera's daughter had accompanied him, her police officer costume worn proudly, despite it not being Halloween. Winters had stared at the child for a long moment before suggesting they start fresh with practical solutions. As April turned to May, construction began on Rivera's property. What started as a one-man project quickly became a neighborhood effort. Off-duty officers arrived with lumber and tools. Martha Jenkins organized a lunch station for the volunteers. Even residents who had initially supported the HOA restrictions found themselves drawn to the camaraderie. The most surprising volunteer appeared on Saturday afternoon. Eleanor Winters herself, dressed in designer jeans and carrying a tray of lemonade. "My father was a firefighter in Queens," she said quietly to Rivera as they stood watching the carport take shape. "He fought for years to park his motorcycle at our building. I should have made the connection earlier." The revised HOA covenant passed at the next meeting, not just with unanimous support, but with applause. The new Community Solutions Committee, co-chaired by Rivera and Winters, would address future disputes with a focus on compromise rather than strict enforcement. When the Bay News 9 van returned 6 weeks after the story broke, they found a transformed neighborhood. The reporter interviewed Rivera and Winters together beside the newly completed carport, where flowering vines were already beginning to climb the lattice screen that partially obscured the cruiser. "In the end, we both wanted the same thing," Winters told the camera. "A safe, beautiful community where rules serve the residents, not the other way around." "Sometimes it takes a crisis to build understanding," Rivera added, his daughter perched on his shoulders. The following month, representatives from 12 other Tampa Bay area HOAs attended a workshop at Bayshore Gardens to learn about their collaborative approach to community governance. As Eleanor Winters led the presentation, she glanced out the window where Rivera's cruiser was pulling out for his shift, the new carport framework visible but unobtrusive, a physical reminder that with creativity and goodwill, seemingly opposing values could coexist after all.